So here we are. It's Mike Nagy with the Center Wellington booth with John Scott of Green Lanes. And this is our series of doing live interviews and chats with people in the community and things that are important to them. So thanks, John, for being our guest.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. So love to why don't you just tell people about yourself? You know, where you grew up, what's inspired you, what your hobbies were. Just tell us some background about you, please.
Okay, sure. I'm John Scott. I grew up in Georgetown, Ontario, not too far away. Both my parents were teachers. My dad was a phys ed teacher, so activity was huge in our life. The outdoors were a big part of our lives. Even though my dad was a city guy, he caught on to this whole canoeing and hiking bug. So that was a part of our lives. And I was just, I guess I was a jock at high school, but never sort of fit into that mold. So that not too complex. And I was a local teacher here in Elora, PS, for 22 years. I taught at the local school.
Well, that's pretty significant.
So there's my existence right there.
You kind of throw that in there like that's nothing, and I'm sure your life is a little bit more interesting. You just made it sound like you've been active in the community. You've been a teacher for 22 years. I'm sure you've inspired a lot of youth. And what about the cycling side? What sort of got you? Before we talk about Green Lanes, let's just talk about your cycling.
I do know, and I don't know why, but in high school, I wasn't much of an artist, but I would constantly doodle bike frames and bikes. And I finally got it, so I was pretty good at bikes. I could draw bikes.
Mm-hmm.
I used to dream of long bike rides. And even as a kid, I remember packing my lunch and riding my bike out to Terracotta.
Terracotta, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And that would have been a summer's day. And I would have done it by myself or with my sister. I would have been maybe 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And I remember I zero gears, right?
Yeah.
CCM, red bike, that sort of thing.
Yep. Me too.
And I just remember the one hill. And it was the hill. And it was a huge challenge always, but it gave you a sense of pride. So that must have done something in my brain, got me hooked a little bit. When I graduated from Teachers College, I thought, okay, I've been at school for an extra 5 years there. I need a little break. So I got a bike and I cycled all through PEI up into Newfoundland to Lawrence, the Meadows, up to the tip of Newfoundland. That got me into that whole tripping. And then life happened, families, that sort of thing. And then just recently, my wife and I, we've gotten back into doing tours. So that's our summer holiday type thing. It's long bike tours. So that's my cycling bit.
Okay. So yeah, I remember the days of childhood where life was just free and easy, and you came home when the porch light came on or supper time in the summers. And I remember exploring around, same with my one-speed bike, but we felt like you went forever, even though it might not have been that far because the effort was big. So tell us about Green Lanes and what inspired you to launch this motivation. So tell us about it first, and then maybe what motivated you. So.
All right. It's sort of the motivation is sort of what we just talked about in a bit, right?
Yes.
But what Green Lanes is, it's not just about bikes. And it's about how understanding that infrastructure, the way we shape our environment, whether it's processes or physical structures, influences our well-being, influences our happiness. There's research all over the place about that. Even where you place a garbage can in relationship to a park bench, that can increase happiness, because what it does is it influences those social interactions, which are huge. And research is pretty clear that those little social interactions, not like with your buddies, not with your family, but with those strangers, it gives you this boost of well-being. and connectedness. So it did stem from that, and it did stem from the idea of when you travel and you see how you move through a community and how it makes you feel. That sort of fed into wanting to do something in our own community. Um, and so, and there was a couple things that happened that sort of shocked me and said, well, we need an advocacy, we need a voice.
Right.
One of them was Water Street in Elora. You know, South River Road goes into Water Street. And I remember going to the community center and looking at the plans. And I looked at the trail master plans. And they had it that section was going to be paved shoulders of some sort for bikes, right?
Yes.
And when they were building it, it was good and wide. And I thought, oh, for sure, it's going to be bike lanes or what have you. And then it turned out to be parking.
Yep.
And that was a real disappointment. And so that sort of fed into green lanes as well. This need to maybe have a voice to say, whoa, maybe those neighbors didn't want the parking, but our community wanted the park. I mean, wanted the bike lanes.
Yes.
Because I don't know what really happened, but they might have gone up and down the street and says, what do you think? You want parking? You want bike lanes? Oh, we want parking. I don't know what happened, but.
No, likely an engineer basically did something from the 1960s playbook and said, widen the street, make it accommodate cars. That's my experience, because I've tried to get bike lanes elsewhere too. And the design goes in without even the public participation on that aspect. But
yeah,
I know exactly the street and the dilemma that you're talking about.
Yeah, so that was one of them that sort of got going. And also during my teaching career, I did a lot with my wife in trying to get kids to be healthy. So that whole well-being bit. We started some program with the local community health. And one of the aspects of this program was about increasing physical activity. And once again, I always went back to, even though I'm a teacher, education isn't the answer. It isn't. I think it's called a G.I. Joe fallacy. I think at the end of the G.I. Joe comic, they said, like, knowledge is half the battle. But it's a fallacy. Knowledge doesn't get you much sometimes. It is actually our environment that shapes us, because we're quite emotional creatures, not very logical. And so that once again, that sort of feeds into it, is the importance for creating health. Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many studies talks about green space, and even in hospitals, how when we grew up, they would be these gray, horrible places without a window to look out, and people would not, the recovery times would be so long, and then simple things is just having a window to look out a green space, and people recovered faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very curious about. I like your comment about the garbage can and the bench too, because I think I understand what you're saying. Is that garbage can shouldn't be right beside the bench, because it's kind of it's taking over the space, is what you're saying, right?
Or the distance away, because someone goes and puts a garbage in, they'll look over. It sparks a conversation.
I get it now. Okay,
yeah,
that's
so it's like
right.
The actual, like people study this, and a lot of smart people that spend a lot of time.
Yes.
Sometimes we think it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Maybe it is, but let's use some of that knowledge. And I just think we just need to be really thoughtful about the things that we build in our communities, because we live with it for a long time.
Okay,
right?
So let's go back to Water Street for a second, and let's use that as an example. So if you were to be able to design the process of consultation before that road was constructed, and it's obviously a fairly loaded, obvious question, but how would you have liked the township to have engaged the community so that the street wasn't built all of a sudden with this features that just accommodated cars, and maybe nobody even wanted the street that way? That's the point you've kind of brought up. We don't even know if anyone really wanted that.
It's hard to know. Like, I put, like, township is in a tough spot, because it is hard to please everyone.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
They did have a process where you went and saw the master plan, and they have people uh, and people from the community put input and so forth. Um, but I have a feeling some of it gets changed a little bit because of uh, sort of the pressure from the, let's say, the neighborhood, right?
Yes.
So I believe on Colburn Street, they were asked, do you want bike lanes there, or do you want parking? And the public on the Colburn said, we want parking. So it's like, and then when they stick to their plans and they don't listen, then we get mad at them for that. So they are caught in a tough place, and I don't really know what the answer is. I personally, I like politicians that tell me what are the things that inform them. I don't like politicians that tell me this is what I'm going to do in my term of office, because that's sort of a really silly thing to say, because you don't know what's going to happen. And COVID is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
No matter what you said a month ago, a year ago about what you're going to do when you get into office, you don't know what's going to come. So I'd rather know what are the things that are informing you,
Yes.
and then I would have a better understanding of how to work with that. But I don't know if I answered your question, because I don't know what the answer is, I think.
Okay, so that's fine. I was maybe talking about, having public meetings, having an input from the public on the design of the street. I know there's been complaints on that street too of the LED lighting that is extremely bright and high. They put the lamp posts up extremely high with a very high luminaire LED. So I think there's been a lot. It's interesting you brought up that street, because I know there's other issues that have gone on with that. Not just, and that's also healthy living. Lighting is associated with, and sleeping disorders, all sorts of things. So, well, tell us about the Welly Loop and how that came up. If you go to anyone here, go to the Facebook page, Green Lanes, and you can see some postings. It's an actual loop. It shows the Welly Loop around the river. Just tell us about that and what the reason for that project or event was.
The reason is COVID. It's a response to it, and I would say it's multifaceted and very layered in the way that we're thinking about it. It's not just a bike loop. It has many different things to it. So the idea is just like everybody else is doing around the world, is they're trying to create more physical space, okay, for people when they're walking and riding. And also just that physical space on some of our residential streets, so kids maybe could be playing basketball or that whole classic ball hockey, like we used to do when we were kids. So to have some of our streets quieted, so there's just a little more space and maybe a little less fear. Maybe it's my teacher in me, but I constantly think of families. And I would say families are having it pretty tough right now during this pandemic. And anything we can do to relieve the stresses and fears that families have, I think is the way to go. So one of the big ideas here is we need to connect our two downtowns. We need to connect Elora to Fergus so that a 10-year-old could ride to it.
Right.
Right, because I'm thinking summertime, camps aren't around, there's nothing happening. So they might do what I did when I was a kid, pack a lunch, go for a picnic, right? Have excursions. And that's sort of what the Welly Loop is.
Yes.
Now, in our master plan, we do have various loops. They're not what I would consider very safe, all of them. And the other thing about the Welly Loop is that you'll notice it's long. And the idea is that's an equity issue. It's like you got to try to have all the, as many of the residences be able to access it.
Yes.
And that's why it's sort of long. But not only that, the length is a beautiful exercise. Like 17 and a half kilometers would be the full loop. And that's a good, nice outing on a bike. Not for serious riders. Serious riders go longer.
But it's significant. It's not yeah. And it's scenic.
And it's scenic. Like the South River Road, I think, is a gorgeous road. It just, I'm personally, I get a little exhausted from the car traffic on there,
Yeah.
and the speeds for sure. But it's very scenic. You go through the cemetery. And I rode in exploring this. I rode through parts of Fergus I've never been. It's like, oh, Confederation Park. It's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Cedar trees, and
Yeah.
it'd be a great place to just chill out on a hot day.
Yeah. And cycling, I will confess I cycle, but I also have a motorcycle too.
Yeah.
And the part of the reason I also like being on a motorcycle and a bicycle is I like to smell things.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're cycling in the morning, you mentioned about going through community, and when you cycle through, you see different things, but you also smell different things.
Absolutely.
You actually feel the neighborhood. You can smell the river. You can smell the trees, especially this time of year. And I totally support the well-being index thing that you brought up on that, because when you're in a car, it doesn't matter even if the window's down, you're just not engaging with the environment. Wouldn't you agree?
And with people.
And with people.
You just have these little chats, these little waves, these little nods, and it reminds you that you're human, and you're moving at a human speed, and it's about connections.
And hence, if we could talk about policing and bicycling too, right? And the studies behind police being more approachable when they're on a bicycle. Obviously, people don't go up to police to talk to them when they're behind a piece of safety glass, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's all sorts of levels of interaction, I guess.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I know in our community, we're very sensitive to the mental health, especially with our young boys, especially young men. But I just think by cycling and walking, it is about freedom. And we don't give our youth freedom, and the freedom to explore,
right,
and to learn those lessons, right? So I think there's some great value in maybe promoting this, and that's what this is. It's partly a promotion to help us with our physical and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it could be a great economic boom, especially from the travels I've done, the places that cater to cycling. There's a lot of money that starts flowing because of that.
Yes, agreed. And cyclists pull over, get ice cream. They stop at stores. They can actually, they might not buy something at a bigger shop, but they're exploring those shops as a part of the adventure for the day. How would you like to see people get more engaged with green lanes, and what would you ask of the public right now to help support your movement here?
I think we are at a time. I sure hope. I mean, we're going through all this stuff, and I sure hope we reflect deeply, and we learn some valuable lessons. And I hope people are getting the sense that, hey, I feel pretty good when I go for walks. Cycling is enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Not rushing around is great. Maybe I don't have to sign my kids up for so much. I can just go for bike rides. I don't know if you've noticed, there's tons of bikes out there, by the way.
Well, and on that note, I'll just interrupt you. Apparently, bike sales are through the roof. They're very hard to find bicycles now. And I know I'm a good friend with Bob Bell, who's counselor in Guelph and runs the Waikiki trailers.
Oh yeah, I bought one of those years ago.
Yeah, he's sold out. His sales are up by 300 or 400%. He can't keep them in stock. The trailers, people have gone gangbusters buying bicycles. So when I want to go back to you saying, I think the time is right.
It is. And it is, but this and this is what I worry about, is we have had 100 years where, and it's not a war on cars, because you drive a motorcycle, I drive a car, I use my car, I like my car. It takes me to places that I want to go. But it's like there's this fear out there that if you give 1 inch, you're giving it all away. And we really have to think deeply. If we do think about our use of cars, and what I'm talking about is, if you think about roads are publicly owned, and they are the largest area of land that the public owns, right? So we own those roads. So there is definitely an equity once again, an equity issue here. And I, I just think they could get, like, that's my worry, because people get real antsy. So what do I want from people? They need to have these conversations so that it doesn't come as a shock. So the more we talk about it, and the more we see the value in supporting something like the Welly Loop, just a bit more space is all we're asking, not much, just a bit more space so kids and families can ride freely, so I can exercise without stress. That's important. And it's not asking much.
No.
And there's a lot of research that shows that, like, money-wise, if a town invests money in active transport, more of that money stays. Like, it's the best dollar for dollar investment. There's less maintenance. There's more workers that are needed to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways.
So just quickly, can you give the viewers just a few of your favorite cycling tips, safety tips, those type of things, awareness?
Yeah.
Your favorite pet peeves. Can you talk about those for a second? Just because I'm sure people, you're an avid cyclist and you've done group cycling, and just some of your observations.
Well, for one, I wouldn't call myself an avid cyclist. I do enjoy it, and I use it as a really good tool for my enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I wouldn't put myself out there in the cyclist realm. But with that said, and I don't have really too many. Anyways, with that said, almost all riders, they seem to have their seat way too low.
Yes, that's true.
And it actually makes things more uncomfortable. It actually makes your bum hurt a little more because all your weight's on your bum when you're riding, instead of a little bit on your arms if your seat was up a little more. So that air and tires is a big one, and they can ride by my place. I'll pump up their tires.
Yes.
So that's the other one. Yeah, those are the two.
I guess it would be good to see some of the active bicycle repair stations, like the Woolwich Arms Pub in Guelph has a bike repair station right in front of the pub. So it has a pump, it has tools, it has all those things. So
we have one at the end of the Cataract Trail.
Yes, that's right.
We're putting in one at the splash pad, I believe, in Elora.
Oh, good.
That park. And so that's good. But my joke with that one is like, you build these things, like, let's say put there, but there's no safe way to ride there.
No.
I was sort of not hoping, but they're building the bridge, obviously, in Elora, and they're going to be bike lanes on the bridge. And I wanted to do I like protests in a dramatic way, sort of fun, but I would have loved everybody to get stationary bikes and place it on the bike lanes and just ride. And because the whole point would be that the bike lanes were going nowhere. It wasn't connected to anything. So but if we get the Welly Loop, I can't really do my protest.
Well, that sounds like a good event. Okay, so before we close, so then people go to Green Lanes on Facebook, right?
Yeah, it's a group.
Yeah, it's a group. And you want people to join, obviously, as a member. Anything else you want them to do through the page? Give comments, post photos?
Oh, yeah, because when you do it as a group instead of a page, anybody can feed in. So this is sort of my approach to a different way of doing groups. I found that if we just do our typical groups, let's say Lions Club or that sort of thing, it misses a great amount of the voices in our community, because let's say young moms, they're just too busy to go to a Monday breakfast meeting or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So this allows people to be involved at their pace. And you throw in your thoughts. One of the ideas that I'm hoping is that if you have a cause or a concern, you go to Green Lanes and you can find people to help you. Not only that, we're starting to learn the political process here in CW, so we have now experiences to give that. For example, this rate today got a letter from the mayor, and he's helping me move to the next step with my team. So that's good. So learning and understanding that sort of the political process, I guess, is important. Something I'm not good at, but it's important.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to say before we close out?
No, drive slow.
Yep.
Be safe. Keep biking. And if this thing gets going, we might need your voice to the councillor's ears. Because if it's something that gets to council, then that's when we will need voices. But definitely join Greens. Numbers matter. Yeah, right?
And also share stories. I know people have traveled around the world. They've seen bike lanes other places, you know, famous cities like Copenhagen and all sorts of places. I'd like to get to see some of these great cycling cities.
And it's sort of fun. Nice people on green lanes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, John. Very much appreciate it. And thanks for your efforts.
Well, my pleasure, Mike, and back at you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.